Overnight, we learned a federal appeals court has partially blocked a ruling that halted approval of the most widely used abortion pill in the United States. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals granted the Justice Department's emergency request to put on hold part of a ruling made last week by a U.S. district judge in Texas that suspended the FDA's approval of mifepristone. That approval dates back to the year 2000. However, the Fifth Circuit Court ruled part of the Texas judge's ruling could go into effect. First, changes the FDA made to the drug's approval used in 2016 will be suspended. That includes a rule that reduced the number of in-person visits patients are required to make from 3 to 1. Second, the FDA's finding in 2021 that the drug can be distributed by mail also would be paused. The Fifth Circuit Court was divided in its decision 2-1. Both appointees of former President Donald Trump were in the majority. The other judge, an appointee of former President George W. Bush, said she would have temporarily blocked the Texas judge's entire ruling. The Department of Justice still can ask the Supreme Court to intervene to completely block the original decision by the Texas judge. So, Eugene Daniels, obviously this is something the White House has watched with keen interest as you cover every day. This is kind of a split decision as we parse through. This just came down a few hours ago as we sift through it, which is that the abortion pill will still be available, but with some of the restrictions called for by this Texas judge.
No, that's right. I was at the kind of announcement and the meeting of the Task Force on Reproductive Access for the White House, where Vice President Harris, the Attorney General, secretaries across the administration were there talking about this, what they were expecting, giving people updates, and more importantly, talking about like how much they're going to fight on this, right? And it does seem kind of probable that they might still want to take this to the Supreme Court because they don't want to be seen as just kind of accepting the dismantling of this pill that's been available for 23 years. One of the things I think that's been really fascinating is hearing an administration that doesn't have a lot of tools to do much about abortion and trying to do those things at the same time. They introduced they took a guidance and turned it into a proposed rule when that going to get in that comment period soon that would have some privacy, attack some privacy concerns that they have. So they're trying to nibble around the edges on this issue because one, they know that they feel like it's very important, but also and probably something that we all know politically. This is something that was a big part in the midterms. They see it as a winning issue for them as they move forward, and they honestly think that Republicans and the right have kind of overplayed their hand. And one thing that's really interesting is that we haven't heard from a lot of the top Republicans on this issue. They're out of town, obviously, but also the Republican presidential candidates, folks that might be there. You're not hearing a lot from them on this or abortion in general. And I think that is something that this White House and Democrats writ large are kind of watching with glee because they know that they think Republicans feel they don't really know where to go with this issue.
So, George, reading the three-judge panel's ruling overnight here about this, basically what they're saying is the statute of limitations is up on this. You can't go back to a 2000 FDA approval and change that 23 years later. But they did leave in place some of those restrictions. You can't get it by mail anymore for the time being anyway. So what do you make of this ruling?
Well, I think there are a lot of other issues with the decision that are going to come out when the case gets heard on the merits. And for example, I don't understand on first reading or second reading how it is that these particular plaintiffs, who are doctors who do not prescribe this drug, have in any way legal standing to challenge either things that happened in 2000 or things that happened after 2016, which is what the Court of Appeals last night allowed upheld, at least temporarily, against a challenge. So I think this lawsuit in the end is going to fail by the anti-abortion plaintiff doctors. It may take a few weeks to get it done, but I just don't understand it, how this decision ever came about.
And Katty Kay, that's kind of the case that was made by the one judge, the George W. Bush appointee, who said, I would have voted to just block this ruling entirely. There's no standing, there's no, the statute of limitations is up, that this should remain as accessible as it's been for 23 years.
Yeah, I mean, those in favor of abortion rights say that just from a historical and medical perspective, this is a very safe drug. It's been proven to be safe. It's approved in other countries and has been for decades. And they felt pretty confident that they would be able to overrule this case. But I think the bigger issue is that time and again, it looks like we're going to see from the anti-abortion movement attempts to chip away and make an abortion ban federal from both a surgical and a medical point of view. They may not be able to do that, but the fact that they've moved this fast, despite what you pointed out, Willie, the politics of this being in Democrats' favor and states around the country doing what they can to enshrine abortion rights, there's still a movement from the anti-abortion crowd that they're not satisfied with the Dobbs ruling. They never were, and they made it very clear immediately after Dobbs that they were not satisfied with the Dobbs ruling. That was just the beginning in their eyes. And so this is set up still to be a political, legal and medical tussle going forwards. And it's not clear that that's going to stop.
Katie, what's your sense of, let's separate the legalese that's going on from this
Thank
particular
goodness.
issue. What's your sense of the fact that at ground level, what this means is you're taking something away from people, specifically women. You're taking a right away that they've had for decades. What's your sense of the impact of that sole loss of a right?
Look, America prides itself on being in a country that expands people's rights, that expands rights of access to those who have not traditionally had power and opens doors to them having it. And so that's why the Dobbs ruling, I think, was such a blow, not just within the United States, but not to get kind of 250,000 feet about this, to America's image around the world. I mean, here was a rollback of a right, and that seemed to go against the perception of what America stands for. And I can't tell you, as I've been traveling around Europe the last few months, the two things that people raise as concerns about the U.S. at the moment, first is guns, and the second is abortion. And even in kind of Catholic countries in Europe, even in Ireland, which has made progress on rights of access to abortion, it's really striking the degree to which America is an outlier at the moment compared to other Western democracies in allowing people rights to abortion.